Black waitress fired for defending homeless man from manager. Next day, man arrived in a Cadillac. Hello my new viewers, we really actually spent a lot of effort scripting this video. Encourage our team by subscribing to this video. I really appreciate your willingness to watch our videos. Let's go back to the story. The coffee pot slipped from Arya Davis's trembling hands, shattering across the black and white checkered floor of Sterling's diner. But she barely heard it. Her eyes were locked on the scene unfolding before her. Her manager, Gerald Mitchell, gripping the collar of a frail homeless man, dragging him toward the door like discarded trash. I said get out. Gerald's voice boomed through the half-empty restaurant, his face twisted with disgust. We don't serve your kind here. The homeless man stumbled, his weathered hands reaching out to steady himself against a table. Patrons gasped. A child started crying, and Arya felt something snap inside her chest, something that had been bending for far too long under the weight of injustice, of cruelty disguised as policy, of human beings treated as less than human. Stop! The word exploded from her lips before she could think, before she could calculate the cost, before fear could silence her the way it had silenced her 1,000 times before. Gerald froze, his grip still tight on the man's threadbare coat. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as they found Arya standing in the middle of the diner, her brown skin flushed with anger, her server's apron still stained with the morning's work. What did you say to me? Gerald's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought of her daughter, Maya, waiting at home. She thought of the stack of unpaid bills on her kitchen counter, the eviction notice that had arrived last week, the empty refrigerator she'd been trying to fill one shift at a time. She thought of everything she had to lose. And then she looked at the homeless man. Really looked at him. Beneath the dirt and the tangled gray beard, she saw eyes that held stories, pain, and something else. A quiet dignity that refused to be extinguished. He reminded her of her father, who had died on the streets of Atlanta when she was 16, forgotten by a world that had decided he wasn't worth remembering. I said stop, Arya repeated, her voice steadier now, each word a small act of rebellion. He's a human being. He deserves to be treated like one. The diner went silent. Even the clatter from the kitchen ceased. Arya could feel every eye in the room on her. The uncomfortable stares of customers who looked away, the nervous glances of her coworkers, and Gerald's burning gaze that promised consequences. He's bothering my customers? Gerald spat, releasing the homeless man with a shove that sent him stumbling backward. Look at him. He's filthy. He smells. This is a respectable establishment. He was just sitting quietly, Arya countered, stepping forward. He wasn't bothering anyone until you made a scene. The homeless man, she would later learn his name was Clark Richardson, looked at her with surprise, as if kindness was a language he'd forgotten existed. His lips moved, trying to form words, but Gerald cut him off. You want to defend him so badly? Gerald's mouth curved into a cruel smile. Fine, you're fired. Get your things and get out. Both of you. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, sharp and final. Arya felt the ground shift beneath her feet, felt her entire world tilt on its axis. Fired. The word echoed in her mind, bringing with it the weight of impossibility. Rent due in 5 days, Maya's school supplies, the car that was one payment away from repossession. But when she looked at Clark Richardson, at this forgotten man that society had rendered invisible, she knew she couldn't have made a different choice. Some things mattered more than survival. Some things mattered more than fear. Fine, Arya said quietly, untying her apron with shaking hands. But before I go, she reached into her pocket, pulling out the crumpled bills from her morning tips. $23, money she'd already mentally allocated to tomorrow's groceries. She walked to the register, ordered a full breakfast, and set the plate down in front of Clark Richardson. You deserve to eat in peace, she told him, her voice breaking just slightly. And as Gerald screamed at them both to leave, as customers whispered and judged, Arya and Clark walked out of Sterling's diner together. She jobless, he homeless, both of them more human than anyone left inside. Arya sat on the curb outside her apartment building in North Philadelphia, watching the evening sun paint the cracked pavement in shades of amber and rust. Her phone buzzed with its third disconnection notice of the week. She silenced it without looking. Inside apartment 4B, 8-year-old Maya was doing homework at their kitchen table, probably wondering why dinner was late again. Probably too smart not to notice the way her mother's smile had been thinning lately, wearing at the edges like an old photograph. Bad day, huh? Arya looked up to find Mrs. Chun from 4C standing there with a plastic container of dumplings. The elderly woman had a way of appearing exactly when Arya's pride was too tired to refuse help. Lost my job, Arya admitted, the words tasting like ash. Defending someone who didn't deserve to be treated like garbage. Mrs. Chun sat down beside her, joints creaking. Then you did the right thing. The right thing always costs something. I can't afford the right thing, Arya whispered, tears finally breaking free. I've got 5 days until rent is due. Maya needs new shoes. I don't even have enough for bus fare to job hunt tomorrow. Mrs. Chun pressed the container into Arya's hands. Feed your daughter. Tomorrow we worry about tomorrow. She patted Arya's knee and stood. You know what I learned in 73 years? The universe keeps accounts. You put goodness in, you get goodness back. Maybe not today, but it comes. Arya wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that standing up for Clark Richardson would somehow matter in the grand calculus of the universe. But sitting there with $23 less than she'd started the day with no job and no prospects, belief felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. That night, after Maya fell asleep, Arya updated her resume by the blue light of her laptop, applying to every waitressing position within 3 bus routes of her apartment. Each application felt like throwing pennies into a well, hoping for miracles. At 2 a.m., she gave up and stood at her window, looking out at the city that had swallowed her father whole. I hope I did the right thing, Daddy, she whispered to his memory. I hope you'd be proud. The city offered no answers, just the distant sound of sirens and the steady heartbeat of survival. Clark Richardson sat in the doorway of an abandoned building on Market Street, his Cadillac parked 3 blocks away in a secured garage. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man worth $42 million, sleeping on cardboard, eating from dumpsters, documenting what it meant to be invisible. For 3 weeks, he'd been homeless by choice, a social experiment that was becoming something far more profound. Clark, founder and CEO of Richardson Dynamics, a tech company that revolutionized supply chain logistics, had spent his entire life insulated by wealth. But after his mother died last year, a woman who'd once been homeless herself, he'd felt compelled to understand the world she'd escaped. What he'd learned terrified him. He'd learned that people looked through you when you were homeless, not at you. He'd learned that cruelty was casual, dispensed without thought. He'd been spat on, kicked, denied bathroom access, and told to die quietly somewhere else. But today had been different. Today, a waitress named Arya Davis had seen him, really seen him. She'd sacrificed her livelihood for a stranger, for a principle, for the radical idea that he deserved dignity. Clark pulled out a small notebook, part of his documentation process, and wrote by streetlight. Day 21. Met someone who restored my faith. Question. How many people like Arya exist? And how do we create a world that doesn't punish them for their kindness? His phone buzzed, his real phone, the expensive one hidden in an inside pocket. A text from his assistant, James. Board meeting tomorrow at 10. They're getting anxious about your absence. Clark typed back, coming home, tomorrow. But everything changes now. He thought about Arya's face when she'd been fired, the way her hands had trembled when she'd bought him that meal. She'd given from her poverty while others hoarded from their abundance. That, Clark thought, was the difference between people who had money and people who had wealth of character. Tomorrow, he would return to his life of boardrooms and quarterly reports. But first, he had a debt to repay. Not a financial debt. Money was easy. He owed Arya something far more valuable. He owed her the proof that kindness mattered, that standing up for strangers wasn't foolishness but the very thing that made us human. Clark made a phone call that would change everything. Arya woke to Maya's small hand shaking her shoulder. Mama, There's a fancy car outside. A man is asking for you. Panic seized Arya's chest. Debt collectors didn't usually drive fancy cars, but maybe they'd upgraded their tactics. She stumbled to the window in her faded nightshirt, peered through the blinds and froze. A sleek black Cadillac sat at the curb, gleaming in the morning sun like something from another universe. Clark reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio. I want to offer you a position at Richardson Dynamics, Executive Director of Human Resources and Corporate Culture. Starting salary is $200,000 a year, plus benefits, stock options, and a signing bonus that will cover 6 months of your current living expenses. The words hit Arya like physical objects. 200,000. She made 23,000 at the diner before being fired. The number was so large it lost meaning, became abstract, became impossible. I can't, she whispered. I'm a waitress. I have a high school diploma and 2 years of community college I couldn't finish. I don't know anything about human resources or corporate anything. You know the most important thing, Clark countered. You know how to see people. You understand dignity. And you have the moral courage to act on your principles even when it costs you everything. Those aren't skills you can teach in business school, Arya. Those are the foundation everything else is built on. But, let me finish, Clark said gently. I've spent 3 weeks watching how businesses treat people they consider beneath them. Homeless people, service workers, anyone without power. And I've realized my company, for all its success, has probably been contributing to that culture. I need someone who will rebuild our values from the ground up. Someone who won't compromise when it gets difficult. Someone exactly like you. Arya's hands trembled. She thought about Maya's worn shoes, about the eviction notice, about years of choosing between electricity and groceries. She thought about the impossibility of this moment. A Cadillac on her street, an offer that sounded like fiction. A homeless man who was secretly a millionaire. Why me? She asked. You could hire anyone. Someone qualified. Someone who won't embarrass you. Clark's expression softened. You already proved your qualifications yesterday. As for embarrassment, he laughed. Arya, I need someone who will embarrass me when I'm wrong. I need someone who will challenge me, who will make sure Richardson Dynamics treats every human being, from the CEO to the janitor to the homeless person outside our building, with equal dignity. Can you do that? Could she? Arya looked up at her apartment window where Maya's face pressed against the glass, watching. She thought about her father, who died without dignity on Atlanta's streets. She thought about the hundreds of times she'd been treated as less than because she served food, because her skin was brown, because she was poor. If I take this job, Arya said slowly, I need promises. I need to know this isn't charity. I need to know I'll actually be able to make changes, that you won't just put me in an office and ignore everything I say. You'll have my full support, Clark promised. And if I ever ignore you, you have my permission to publicly embarrass me at a board meeting. For the first time in days, Arya smiled. Really smiled. Can I have that in writing? Absolutely. The next 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and moments where Arya had to pinch herself to confirm she wasn't dreaming. Clark had been true to his word. The signing bonus arrived in her account. A number so large she'd called the bank to confirm it wasn't an error. She paid her rent, bought Maya new shoes, new clothes, school supplies, stood in the grocery store and wept quietly in the cereal aisle because she could buy name-brand everything, could fill her cart without calculating every penny. Mrs. Chun watched the transformation with knowing eyes. I told you, the old woman said. Universe keeps accounts. But Arya felt uneasy with the windfall. Guilt gnawed at her. Guilt that she'd needed someone else to rescue her. Guilt that her life had changed because of who Clark was rather than what she'd done. Guilt that thousands of other Aryas were still struggling while she'd gotten lucky. She voiced these concerns to Clark over coffee at a cafe near Richardson Dynamics headquarters. They were meeting to discuss her transition into the role, but Arya couldn't focus on logistics while her conscience was eating her alive. I don't deserve this, she said quietly. I just did what anyone should do. And now my life is completely different while everyone else who does the right thing still struggles. How is that fair? Clark set down his cup carefully. It isn't fair. You're right. But Arya, this isn't about what you deserve. No amount of money could repay what your kindness meant to me. This is about what you can do with this opportunity. You feel guilty? Channel that into making sure Richardson Dynamics becomes a company that treats everyone the way you treated me. Expand the impact of that one moment. I don't know how, Arya admitted. I've never had power before. I don't know how to use it without becoming the kind of person I stood up against. Then we learn together, Clark said. And we start by listening. Tomorrow I want you to come to the office. Not as an executive yet. Just observe. Watch how our employees interact. See what needs fixing. And then we fix it. That night, Arya couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about power and responsibility, about how easy it would be to forget where she'd come from, to become comfortable in her new life and ignore the suffering she'd left behind. She made herself a promise. No matter how high she climbed, she would remember what it felt like to count pennies for bus fare. She would remember Gerald's cruelty and Clark's dignity and her father's forgotten death. She would remember, and she would use that memory to change things. Richardson Dynamics occupied 15 floors of a glass tower in downtown Philadelphia. Arya walked through its marble lobby feeling like an imposter in her new professional clothes, a suit Clark had insisted on buying her, but which felt like a costume. The observation day revealed everything and nothing. Employees were polite, professional, efficient. But Arya, trained by years of reading customers at the diner, noticed the small things. The way junior staff hurried past senior executives without making eye contact. The cleaning crew that worked invisible shifts people treated as furniture. The dismissive tone managers used with anyone below their pay grade. It was subtle. Nothing like Gerald's overt cruelty. But it was there, a quiet dehumanization built into the structure of professional success. During lunch, Arya sat in the cafeteria and struck up conversations. Maria, the woman who cleaned the executive floor, admitted she'd worked there 7 years without anyone learning her name. Devin, a young black programmer, described being passed over for promotion 3 times despite stellar reviews. Lisa, a receptionist, explained how executives would complain to her about her if she couldn't immediately connect their calls, treating her like a malfunctioning machine rather than a person managing 50 requests simultaneously. Arya filled a notebook with observations, with names, with stories. And that evening, she presented everything to Clark in his office. Your company isn't cruel, she told him bluntly, but it's careless with human dignity. And carelessness can be just as damaging as intentional cruelty. Clark listened, really listened, as Arya outlined a vision, mandatory respect training that included executives, not just lower-level staff. A program where senior leadership spent 1 day monthly doing frontline jobs.
Transparent promotion criteria.
A dignity committee where any employee could report dehumanizing treatment without fear. It sounds expensive, Clark said when she finished. And it will slow down certain processes. Arya met his eyes. You asked me to rebuild your corporate culture. This is what that looks like. But if you're not serious, if this was just feel-good charity, tell me now. The silence stretched. Then Clark smiled. When can we start? Tomorrow, Arya said. And I want to start with you. Tomorrow you're working janitorial duty with Maria. I want you to spend 8 hours cleaning bathrooms and offices while wearing a uniform that makes you invisible. Think you can handle that? Clark's smile widened. Arya, I spent 3 weeks homeless. 8 hours cleaning bathrooms will be easy. Good, Arya said. Because after you, every executive is going to do the same thing. If we're going to change this culture, it starts from the top. The board meeting 3 weeks later was a disaster. Arya sat at the massive conference table, the only woman, the only black person, listening to 5 wealthy white men explain why her programs were unnecessary and financially imprudent. We're a tech company, not a charity, Gerald Whitmore, the CFO, said dismissively. These diversity and dignity initiatives sound nice, but they don't increase shareholder value. Arya felt her face flush, felt the familiar sensation of being diminished, being told implicitly that she didn't belong. But she'd promised herself she wouldn't be silenced anymore. Mr. Whitmore, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Can you tell me who cleaned your office this morning? He blinked. What? Simple question. Who cleaned your office? What's their name? I don't know. The cleaning staff, I assume. Maria Gonzalez, Arya supplied. She's worked here for 7 years. She has 3 children. She's taking online courses to become a nurse. And you've never learned her name because your corporate culture has taught you she's not worth noticing. The room went silent. Arya pressed on. That's what my programs address. Not some abstract diversity initiative, but the basic recognition that every person in this company deserves to be seen. And if you think that doesn't affect shareholder value, she pulled out her tablet. I've run the numbers. Employee retention is up 18% since we started these programs. Productivity is up 12%. Sick days are down. And our company reputation has improved significantly. We've had 3 major clients specifically cite our new culture as a reason for choosing us over competitors. Clark, sitting at the head of the table, had been silent until now. Arya's right, he said quietly. And gentlemen, let me be clear. These programs aren't optional. They're the new foundation of how Richardson Dynamics operates. If that's a problem for anyone, I'll accept your resignation. The tension was thick enough to cut. But one by one, the board members nodded. Gerald Whitmore looked furious, but he said nothing. After the meeting, as Arya gathered her papers with shaking hands, Clark pulled her aside. You were magnificent, he told her. I was terrified, she admitted. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. And Arya, you're changing this company. Don't stop. But not everyone was happy about the changes. Over the next weeks, Arya received anonymous emails calling her an affirmative action hire, and worse, someone scratched her car in the parking lot. She'd find her office supplies stolen, her coffee tampered with, small acts of sabotage designed to tell her she didn't belong. Maya noticed her mother's stress. Are people being mean to you at work? The 8-year-old asked one evening. Arya wanted to lie, to protect her daughter from ugly truths. But she remembered her father once telling her, don't protect children from reality. Teach them how to face it. Yes, baby, Arya said honestly. Some people don't like changes that make things fairer. They're comfortable with the way things were. But you're not going to quit, right? Maya asked, her eyes worried. Arya pulled her daughter close. No, baby, I'm not going to quit. Because quitting means all those people trying to push me out win. And I didn't raise you to show you how to quit when things get hard. Good, Maya said firmly. Because my teacher says you're making history. She told our class about what you're doing. In that moment, Arya realized the impact extended far beyond Richardson Dynamics. She was showing Maya, and countless other children, that standing up mattered. That dignity wasn't negotiable. That change was possible. 6 months after that morning when a Cadillac appeared on her street, Arya stood in Sterling's diner, the place where everything had changed. But she wasn't there as an employee. She was there as the primary investor in its new ownership. Gerald Mitchell had run the diner into the ground after Arya left. Turns out, treating people terribly wasn't good for business. The place had gone bankrupt, and when it went up for sale, Clark had told Arya about it. Want to buy the place that fired you? He'd asked with a grin. Now she stood in the refurbished diner. Same checkered floors, same red booths, but transformed by new values. The menu board displayed starting wages well above minimum. A sign by the door read, Everyone welcome. No exceptions. The new manager was Devin, the programmer who'd been passed over for promotion at Richardson Dynamics. He'd taken the leap to hospitality management and was running the diner as a training ground for people trying to get back on their feet. Formerly homeless individuals, people leaving prison, anyone who needed a second chance. We're creating a pipeline, Arya explained to a local news reporter who'd come to cover the story. People work here, get training, get stability, and then we help place them in permanent positions at Richardson Dynamics or other partner companies. We're proving that investing in people's dignity is good business. The reporter asked about Gerald Mitchell, who'd applied for a dishwashing position after his unemployment benefits ran out. Did you hire him? She asked. Arya smiled. Yes, everyone deserves a second chance. But he's starting at the bottom, and he's going to learn what it feels like to be treated the way he treated others. Either he'll learn empathy, or he won't last. But I'm giving him the opportunity. That evening, as the diner closed, Arya found herself sitting in the same booth where Clark had sat 6 months ago. She thought about the chain of events that had brought her here. One moment of standing up for a stranger, multiplied into something larger than she'd imagined possible. Her phone buzzed. A text from Clark. Board approved your proposal. We're taking the dignity programs nationwide to all our offices. You're changing the world, Arya. She typed back, we're changing it. Together. Because that was the truth she'd learned over these months. One person's kindness mattered, but it was the ripple effect. The way that kindness inspired others, the way standing up gave permission for others to stand up, that truly transformed things. Arya left the diner and drove home to Maya. To their new apartment in a safe neighborhood with good schools. To a life she'd never imagined possible. But she carried with her the memory of struggle, of counting pennies, of the desperation that had made that $23 meal feel like everything. She would never forget. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure others didn't have to choose between principle and survival. 1 year after the Cadillac appeared on her street, Richardson Dynamics held its annual company celebration. But this year was different. Instead of a formal gala at an expensive hotel, the party was held in a community center in North Philadelphia, and the guest list included every employee, from executives to cleaning staff to cafeteria workers, plus their families. Arya stood on a small stage, looking out at hundreds of faces. She saw Maria, the janitor who was now 6 months away from her nursing degree, paid for by Richardson Dynamics' new education program. She saw Devon, managing 3 Sterling's diner locations and training 50 formerly homeless individuals. She saw Mrs. Chun, who'd been hired as a consultant for the company's community outreach program. And she saw Clark, standing off to the side, not at the center of attention but watching with pride as Arya prepared to speak. A year ago, Arya began, her voice carrying across the room, I was fired from my waitressing job for defending a homeless man's dignity. I thought that moment would be the worst day of my life. I thought standing up for what was right would cost me everything. She paused, gathering her thoughts. In some ways, it did. I lost my job. I lost my sense of security. But what I gained was so much more valuable. I gained the proof that kindness matters. That standing up for strangers isn't foolishness. It's the most important thing we can do as human beings. Applause rippled through the crowd, but Arya held up her hand. This past year, Richardson Dynamics has transformed. Not because of one person, but because all of you chose to participate in that transformation. You chose to learn each other's names. You chose to see the humanity in your coworkers. You chose dignity over convenience. And the results speak for themselves. She pulled out her tablet, showing statistics on the screen behind her. Employee satisfaction is up 43%. Retention is at an all-time high. Our profits haven't suffered. They've increased by 18%. We've proven that treating people well isn't just morally right. It's good business. More applause, louder now. But Arya wasn't finished. But we can't stop here. Because for every person in this room whose life has improved, there are thousands still struggling. Still choosing between rent and food. Still being treated as invisible. Still watching their children go without. And we have a responsibility to extend what we've built here out into the world. She gestured to Clark. That's why I'm proud to announce that Richardson Dynamics is launching the Dignity Initiative, a nonprofit foundation that will partner with businesses across the country to implement the programs we've developed. We're going to train managers on respectful leadership. We're going to create hiring pipelines for marginalized communities. We're going to prove city by city, company by company, that dignity isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. The applause now was thunderous. People stood, cheering, and Arya felt tears streaming down her face. Tears of joy, of accomplishment, of profound gratitude for the impossible chain of events that had brought her here. After the speeches, after the food and the dancing, Arya found herself alone with Clark on the community center's roof deck, looking out at the Philadelphia skyline. Do you ever regret it? She asked him. Those 3 weeks homeless? The documentary never aired. You went through all that suffering, and it never became what you planned. Clark shook his head. It became something better. It led me to you, and through you to all of this. He gestured at the celebration below. My original plan was to make a film that would raise awareness. But this, what we're building, this changes lives directly. This is real impact. I still can't believe it sometimes, Arya admitted. I wake up and expect to find myself back in my old apartment, scrambling to make rent. You know what I believe? Clark said. I believe the universe puts people in each other's paths for a reason. I needed to meet someone who would show me what true character looked like. And you needed someone who could amplify your impact, who could give you the platform to change things on a scale you couldn't reach alone. We were meant to meet, Arya. That moment in the diner? That was destiny. Arya smiled. I don't know about destiny, but I know I'm grateful. For you. For this opportunity. For the chance to prove that kindness isn't weakness. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker. And Arya thought about her father, wondered if somehow he could see this, could know that his daughter had taken the pain of his forgotten death and transformed it into a movement that refused to let anyone be forgotten. To kindness, Clark said, raising his glass of champagne. To dignity, Arya corrected, touching her glass to his. To both, they said together. And to every person still fighting to be seen. Below them, the celebration continued. People dancing, laughing, celebrating not just a company's success but the proof that when we choose to see each other's humanity, when we choose dignity over convenience, when we choose kindness over cruelty, we create something beautiful. One moment of standing up for a stranger had become a movement. One act of kindness had rippled outward, touching hundreds of lives, and would soon touch thousands more. And it all started with a waitress and a homeless man, both of whom refused to accept that human dignity was negotiable. That, Arya thought, was a story worth telling.